Hello, I'm John Dennison, Chairman of the World Rugby Memorial Project, and with me today I have Laurine Fabrier and Brian Rolfe. Laurine is a member of the team here at the historical Grand Guerre Museum in Péronne, and Brian is our World Rugby Memorial Ambassador from the Royal Hospital Chelsea. We're just going to sort of have a general discussion looking at the idea of education, remembrance, how that ties together with the events that we run, particularly with the Rugby Memorial, which is a sports-based theme. So, Laurine, would you like to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and the role that you play here in Péronne?
So I work here since 10 years ago. I also work at Thiepval Memorial, Thiepval Museum. I'm a guide here. So for example, I do guided tour for students, but also adults here inside the museum, but also on the Remembrance Trail. And we also create some animation for children, adults, and things like that inside the museum to help them to understand what is inside the museum and about the history of the First World War.
Indeed, and the fact we're here in Péronne, of course, we're right in the heart of the Somme region, aren't we? And this is the department that really a lot of people associate with World War One.
Yes, because we have many events here during the First World War and also the Battle of the Somme, and we have a lot of place near Péronne and also inside the area. So a lot of people from everywhere in the world come here to visit, and it's really interesting because we discover a lot and we learn a lot also with people.
Indeed. And Brian, as I said, Royal Hospital Chelsea. Now, anybody viewing this discussion and anywhere around the world, I'm sure is familiar with the Royal Hospital Chelsea itself. And just tell us a little bit about the Royal Hospital.
And Royal Hospital been going for 330 years. It looks after old soldiers of the British Army, basically until we turn our toes up. It's got a major place in the nation's heart because they all recognise the scarlet coats that the pensioners wear. From the Festival of Remembrance, they see them at the cenotaph. I think that the thing that I get involved with and want to bring out is the fact that the human race is great at repeating its mistakes. And if we look at the two great wars that have been in this area, unless we learn from it, we're not going to be able to avoid them. But if we can educate the children and show them just exactly what, and I don't want to use the horrors of war, but what war means and the price that's paid, then we're achieving something. And if we can do that through sport, draw the youngsters over here for the sport that they love, rugby, and while they're here enjoying their rugby, give them an idea of what war means, then that education and bringing in remembrance is making a worthwhile impact on young lives for the future. And if only one of them goes forward and becomes a member of parliament or the government in his own country and acts sensibly with a, not pacifist, but with a view to avoiding conflict, then we've achieved a great deal.
Indeed.
That's what I look at.
Indeed. And I mean, you mentioned the rugby, and again, one of the reasons we're here this week is for the annual Armistice International Youth Rugby Festival, which is based in Compiègne. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about that later on. But what we try and do, which I always feel is important, is to combine an activity. And now that activity could be sport, it could be music, it could be just purely educational, but then link it with a main education element, and then bring in the remembrance side as well. And I think that's how people begin to draw their own conclusions from what they see on the ground, isn't it? And I mean, do you find that when you do your tours?
Yes, also because if we just talk about purely history to young students, they will maybe be interesting, but it's not as it's not really fun for them. But if you talk about history with games and activity and things that they like, they will be maybe much more interested in the subject. For example, if they love to play rugby in their everyday life, and if you just tell them, oh, you like it, but do you know that during the First World War, and after you can talk about war and remembrance also. So it's a good thing to take every aspect of the subject to help us to interesting them on the subject and the First World War also.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we tend to do when we have visiting groups, we have lots of discussions in the background before they come, and a lot of research also takes place, and we frequently find a story linked to a club, a school, university or an association, and then we can actually take those people to that place where their former school pupil now is, who lost his life in World War One, and there's a huge emotional connection. Is what I tend to find as well.
Yes, because also if you tell them how many people died during the First World War, they will be impressed by this number. But also if you tell, you see, this man, if you talk about his life, they will sometimes maybe identify as his hobby or things like that. And when you will take this example, it will make it much more important for them maybe, or they will also keep in mind these things. What we see also is that people always remember the little stories, everyday life story that we can tell them about the First World War. So because it's things that they can link with their life also. So it's really interesting and important also to take that kind of example.
Absolutely. And Brian, just sort of moving across, and let's just take that rugby angle between us. I mean, both you and I, great enthusiasts for the game, but we unveiled the World Rugby Ball itself on the 16th of September 2016 on the battlefields of the Chemin des Dames. And people often ask me, well, why there? And the very simple answer is the first 4 internationals killed in World War One, out of a total of 133 internationals, were killed on the Chemin des Dames. And that's a fact, in that particular area, between 1914 and 1918, there was actually 15 internationals in total, 12 of which were French, 2 from Scotland and 1 from England. And it developed a theme as to why we chose that as a location for the memorial itself. And bringing you in, Brian, with the Royal Hospital Chelsea hat on, we invited you to become our first project ambassador back in 2019. And how have you seen that role develop over the last few years?
First of all, the idea of being an ambassador was alien to me anyway. What really brought it home to me was almost 2 years later at a match in Twickenham, and I was escorting another pensioner who's not so good on his pins, and a young boy grabbed hold of, not a young boy, a teenager, grabbed hold of me and said, "You're him, it's you. You were at Compiègne." And it was a boy from Breda in Holland who recognised me from then, and to have that impact on a boy, especially a teenager, that they don't forget you and they remember the things that you've said, means that the role of ambassador is much, much greater than I ever imagined it to be. I get invitations back to schools and to rugby clubs because boys remember me. And there's even one club who their under-16s team have got a teddy bear dressed up as a Chelsea pensioner, which is called Little Brian, and it's the team captain's job to make sure that it goes to every away match. So the impact that it's had is far wider and far greater than I ever realised. And it's humbling that people feel that way. The boys, they've heard all the huge figures of casualties, but when we can bring it down to them and say, look, at the First World War, a whole rugby team, all 15 of them, together went down to the enlistment office and enlisted in a unit, and then they fought together, and a lot of them died. To give that, I mean, take the Devonshire Trench. That people won't know about it, but it's
That's just outside of Mametz, isn't it, Brian?
It's all part of the Somme, and all of those men came from very much the same area, and they're in two long lines of men that died. All of them, all their families, they all knew each other. That kind of spirit of comradeship and the cohesion of a rugby club brought into a military unit, and they begin to understand why did these men go over the top? Well, because the scrum half and the front row went over the top as well, so the whole team goes together. The same with the armed forces, because they wouldn't have a concept of it now at their age. Later on in life, I'm sure that they will, but if we can use rugby as a vehicle to draw them in to remembrance and to understanding of what it all means, then that's the primary goal. At the end of it, they go away, and I'd like to think that the comradeship, the cohesion of their team is that much more, because they've seen that it's not something new, it's something that's gone on for the best part of 100 years, and that it did good then, and it'll do good now. So it's a torch, it's something deep in your heart. It covers so many different facets of human existence, let alone anything else. So I can't explain it anymore. It's deep inside me. I feel it all the time when I'm with the boys, when I'm at rugby matches, and well, long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, looking slightly deeper into the rugby angle, it is very much that a lot of the officer class were at private schools, so therefore they had leadership roles. But also you had icons like Ronnie Porton-Palmer, the England captain, who was very much the pin-up boy of the sport back in 1913, 1914, and seen as a great leader. And people will follow through, they will enlist, they will be part of that company, unit or regiment, whatever, and they will follow these heroes as such. So that was another big link going back.
The problem is society has changed a great deal since then, John.
Yeah.
And the upper class leader doesn't exist anymore. I mean, in the army, you tend to lead on merit, and I mean, it's probably no surprise to people that if the officer's no good, it's the sergeants and the warrant officers that get the unit to do what's needed, and they're the people that follow. It's more competency based now than it was then, and it's the change in society which is quite incredible. From the serf with his sickle over his shoulder, the lord of the manor said, "We're going to war," and that's what he took as a weapon, to the modern day soldier. The change in society over that period of time is absolutely amazing. And the same with Brian. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where if I didn't do what I was told, I would be shot. Yet,
Yes.
men here were told, over the top you go, and if you didn't go over the top, then you were just likely to be shot in the trench by your own NCOs, because discipline had to be maintained. And we've seen it with the men that were shell-shocked and mentally destroyed who were put up in front of a post and shot to encourage the others. That kind of thing doesn't happen now. What we try to do is we use the team spirit to get the unit to be effective, just the same as we do in rugby. And it's I don't, but I can't explain it any deeper. It's something that, for a serviceman, for a sportsman, should be ingrained. It's that kind of thing that you're all for the team, to move the team forward, and that's rugby. Loyalty to your friends, loyalty to the club, and do your damnedest. But at the end of the day, your best is what we're looking for, and it'll always be accepted as that.
And also when troops were then taken out of the front line, many a time, and we got many a record of this as well, that you have various football matches, rugby games, and even cricket matches. So there's a lot of sport took place behind the lines, and there was almost international games between some of the countries as well. And of course, there was very famously in 1917 in Paris, the match between France and what was nicknamed the Trench Blacks. New Zealand was known as the All Blacks. Well, these guys came out of the trenches and played this game, and literally came out of the trenches, played the match in Paris, and then went back to war. I mean, it's hard to get your head around, isn't it, these days? But I mean, it's that kind of comradeship that the sport brings out, and I would suggest that education-wise, that you're trying to inspire people to think as an individual, but also think as a group as well.
Yes.
And sort of let ideas bounce around between people. So when you're presenting your tours, and you're looking for it's almost like a common denominator, a point where they can all progress together with their knowledge.
Yes, because when we have scholar groups, we try to find the subject that will interest them. And for example, I always tell when I do my trial that even if they don't really like history at first, if they like sport, if they like music, fashion, if they like reading comics, for example, they can still find some things, a link with the First World War, because every part of the society have been impacted by this war. So if they want to learn much more about the First World War through the sport, it's good, it's okay. The most important thing is to learn about the history, the First World War, and to remember also this war. And the way that you do that, it's less important in the way that the most important is to learn and to remember.
During the conflict itself, you actually had social change as well, which had a great impact. But also then there was many advances. I mean, okay, we'll take the military advances to one side in the mechanics of the Great War. But then if we look at the idea then of medical treatment, which was greatly improved. Lots of new techniques were found as well, wasn't it? In the various hospitals. Then, as you say, it wasn't just sporting people involved. If we take the number of poets that were there, writers as well, artists. There's people from absolutely all backgrounds, wasn't there? So it's trying to interweave and relate those as well, isn't it?
And also it's important for students to once again to link with things that they are doing in their everyday life. For example, after school, on maybe on Wednesday, they are playing rugby with their friends. So maybe when they will come back and they said, oh, do you know that during the First World War also rugbymen have been involved, or things like that, and they will keep remembering it when we give this little information, little idea. After they will maybe research also by their own, and maybe they will be after ambassadors also of this First World War, of the remembrance of the First World War. So it's important to just put a seed about this this war in their head, and after they will make it grow and talk also about it.
Yeah, and specific what I do, how I see my role as someone who organises events and creates events to bring people together. I see it more as a community type project than anything else. And engaging the community, I think from the younger age group going through now, I think is where the strength lies for the future of, you know, what we've learnt over the years, you know, ourselves, and the thoughts that we've developed and that we're trying to pass on these memories. I mean, we use the slogan inspiring future generations. So, you know, when you look at whether it be sport or education, so what's your thoughts along those lines, Brian?
Well, it's the social change that the conflicts bring about. I mean, we're talking, obviously, the First World War is quite important because of where we are.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the social change that took part in the First World War. Look at the Second World
Yes.
War. After the Second World War, women suddenly had a place in the workplace. The women's movement as such exploded. And at the same time, we've now got young girls playing rugby alongside the boys and learning the sport and being drawn into it, so that it's all encompassing.
And there's more females in the military as well,
Yeah.
not just in the UK, but in France and many countries.
Yes.
But it brings about social change. It makes people stop and think.
From where we are now, Brian, I mean, where do you see the role of remembrance going forward? Let's say if we roll this forward 10, 20, even 50 years from now, I mean, how can we keep people engaged?
Unfortunately, I suspect that conflict will be what keeps the people engaged. And I don't know what the solution will be, other than to try to teach people that, all right, nations go to the war, but does it solve anything? And the answer is no. It's after the war when I don't want to say level-headed, but when the saner members of society get together and try to avoid it happening again, then things last that bit longer. But remembrance is the one thing that pulls it all together. You know, let's remember back. How far do we have to go back? I mean, we've got the situation of the Crusades is still being acted out between the Muslim and the Christian, even in today's age. And we don't seem to have learned anything. We've got the same situation, religion, with the Jews and the Muslims in Palestine, the Palestinians. Yet both of them preach peace, but it's not getting through. If we can do it through sport, what they can't do through their religions, and it's a win-win situation.
Well, just bring more engagement.
They get the enjoyment.
Yeah.
And it's enjoyment rather than duty, or, I don't know, learning things by rote, as they do in the churches and chanting. It's a different move. I mean, it won't work for everybody, but for those who get involved in it, and they come here, then it stops them and gives them pause for thought. And as long as they remember even a part of it, then I think we've made them a better citizen than they were
before.
And that will always continue, because remember, the children that come here are going to be the players of the future, who are going to be the coaches that go to look after the children of the future. So it's a continual development.
Yes.
And in that respect, sport will continue, therefore the development will continue. If you base it all around education in the school, how much of what you learned at school do you remember 30 years down the line. You remember what relates to the job or the role that you have in society, but just exactly what all the names of the different parts of a plant were. If you're not a botanist, how many people can remember what a pistil is? It's that kind of thing. But within sport, it's a feeling inside. It's not what you've got filed away in your memory. It's almost what they call it, muscle memory. You remember that you're part of a team, that everybody on the team is working towards a goal, and that's got to work through life anyway. So it's a life's lesson, or a lifestyle lesson, as well as remembering what went before. And if it all gets jumbled together and it all works its way through in your mind, then that's got to be good. That's the way forward.
Yeah, and I mean, again, sort of in moving forward, I mean, we're sitting here in this wonderful museum here in Peron, and there are various other museums and locations around here for people to visit. But where do you see the role of somewhere like the historical museum here in Peron in the future?
I hope that we will still in the future be welcoming young students, because we have students from 6 years old to university, so from all age, and it's important to explain to them what happened and to keep talking to them about wars, because it's like that they will maybe learn. We have to, as you said, to educate them about this and to teach them. And for students who live near here, sometimes they come here with school 3 times when we are in the primary school, college, and the lycée here. So they sometimes they also come back with their family during holidays. So it's important to be still here, to be still here, to remember and to say to people, even if it was 100 years ago, we still link some event with contemporary events which are happening nowadays. So it's important to keep in mind what happened in the past. And yes, I hope we will still be here for people and students, and to help them to remember.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I say towards the end of an event, so whether or not we've just got one small group or we've got a large group, is that having been with us, that first of all, you've enjoyed yourself, which is one of the most important things, but also that I hope with you, you've taken away some new knowledge and combined that with the activities that we shared together as well. And a lot of the people we have are all aged between, let's say, 15 to 18 as the average age groups that we work with on a regular basis. And I always finish by saying that if you were to come back in 20 years' time, quite probably you'll have your own family, at which point someone will say to their children, well, I came here to play rugby, I came here to play football, I came here to sing in a school choir.
Yes.
They can relate that story onto their children and hopefully inspire them that when they get to the ages of 15 to 18, they'll be able to come as a group to something, and then another 20 years further down the line, they will say the next thing again, you know. So that's kind of my dream or wish.
Yes. Here we are lucky because we are still here, and sometimes they come back, and sometimes we do a remembrance trail with a school, and it happened that maybe 2 or 3 weeks after we see one child with his family, and because after the trail, when he get back home, he told his parents what he have seen during the day. So few weeks after they come back here, so it's kind of what you said, because after they will keep in mind, because they will have spent family time here, learning things, and with this kind of memories they will always talk about that also, and also about this place and the remembrance of the First World War.
That's absolutely brilliant. Well, Lorraine and Brian, thank you very much for being our guest this afternoon.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed hearing your thoughts
Yes.
during this discussion, and we hope that at some point we will inspire other people,
Yes, we
next
hope.
generations, to come and visit. But thank you
you.
very much.
No, I mean, that John, you deserve a great deal of thanks. You and Frank, who basically founded the World Rugby Memorial, and its importance hasn't really, I think, in the world yet been acknowledged. But when we take boys there, that's the only place in the world where you can go and remember all the rugby players. Sure, nations and clubs have got their own memorials to their players. But when you go to the World Rugby Memorial, you're remembering all of the rugby players that have died in the past and are likely to die in the future, because that memorial is dedicated to everybody. And again, it's bringing people together. And that's down to you and Frank.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Anyway, that concludes our discussion for this afternoon. And again, I'd just like to thank Loreen and Brian for being our guests today. This is the first time we've done one of these round table discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more in the future. But anyway, thank you again.
Thank you.